you're getting the exposure and the information that you need to be successful in your transfer pursuits, but then also help you with other aspects of your academic journey as well. So we want to give you a well-rounded experience. So you'll find that this second webinar is more focused on research and graduate school. So we have our first workshop for the day will be a journal club, which we will talk more about. Then we'll have the hidden curriculum in STEM, and then a graduate student panel where you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Anything that you want that is you're thinking about for graduate school, you'll have the opportunity to ask that to graduate students. So let's get started. Okay, so if you don't know already, this meeting will be recorded. So if you're not comfortable with having your face shown, please keep your cameras off. And then if you want to ever revisit this recording, we will be posting it on the website and the link that I shared with you while everyone was in the waiting room. So first, we will have our welcome by our director, Alfred Herrera, who's the Assistant Dean for Academic Partnership and the Director for CCCP. All right, Alfred?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Aurelia said, my name is Alfred, and very happy to see all of you here. It is great to see so many of you interested in participating in the webinars for STEM. We are very excited to be able to provide some information that's critical to your transfer pathway. This is not an admissions workshop. It is really more about STEM and the experiences that you will find. We have a faculty member who will be talking later about hidden curriculum, and Aurelia will talk more about that. But it's really about how to be successful and how to excel in STEM, and through the eyes and experiences of many students and faculty that are involved in that. So we are happy that you are joining us and will become part of the CCP network, and we are here to provide any support and help with you on your journey. Make sure that you continue to reach out to us after the webinar, apply to CCP, become a CCP scholar, and we will be providing lots of different opportunities for you to engage in additional activities, from the application for admissions through financial aid, through other kinds of webinars that we hope to provide over the course of the next year. So again, thank you for joining us, and make sure that you ask a lot of questions. Thank you. And thank you to Aurelia and her team for creating this webinar and all of the information. I'm sure that you will find that it is going to be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. Oops. Okay, so I shared the link in the chat, but if you missed the link in the chat, feel free to use your phone to scan the QR code on the screen to visit our STEM website. It has all the information regarding STEM that you need to know, links to different websites like assist.org, the UC application, UC tab. It also has a link to the article that we need today for the first workshop. And then you can also find the videos from previous webinars for STEM that we've had, so you can take a look at them if you weren't able to attend our first STEM webinar, all right? And then Nazanin has also shared the link in the chat again. All right, so let's meet the committee. So you already met Alfred. He was also a part of the committee to help plan this day. My name is Aurelia Reimer. I also was a transfer student. I transferred from Santa Monica College to UCLA. I was an anthropology BS student. I'm also pre-med, so I saw some pre-med students here. So woo, pre-med folks. So I'm the STEM program coordinator for CCCP. And Blanca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course, really quick. My name is Blanca Cantera Hershey. I'm the office coordinator as well as the communications co-coordinator. And just like Aurelia, I also transferred from Santa Monica College. So it's good to see another fellow Corsair, and hopefully there are more Corsairs in the room. I'm a product of CCCP. I participated in Classic Site a while ago, then transferred to UCLA, and I was involved in ideas, the support group for undocumented students on campus. Graduated, did some work in DC in regards to immigrant rights, came back, and went right back to the nest. So I'm really glad to be back in a space to continue supporting transfer students. So welcome to you all, and I hope you enjoyed this wonderful webinar.
Thanks, Blanca. All right. So now, okay, cool. So now we're going to meet the peer advisors on our team, the STEM peer advisors. So I'm going to introduce the ones that weren't able to make it today. So first we have Vanessa Lynn. She's also a STEM peer advisor, but she also is a peer advisor for Pasadena City College. So if you're attending Pasadena City College, she will be your main contact for anything STEM related. She's a neuroscience major, and I believe she also transferred from Pasadena City College. I also believe she's involved in research. So if you have any questions with that, feel free to schedule an appointment with her. And then Fatima, she is also a STEM major. She transferred from LA Pierce College and also is the peer advisor for Pierce College. I believe she's also holding office hours for the summer. So if you want to speak more to her, feel free to book an appointment with her. And Kalia, are you here? Have you made it in yet? All right, I don't believe Kalia has made it in yet, but she will be joining us later on today. So Kalia is a STEM major. She's majoring in mathematics, I believe, and she transferred from the Bay Area, but she is the peer advisor for Los Angeles Southwest College. So if you attend Los Angeles Southwest College, please feel free to reach out to her and ask her any questions. And then so we'll start with the peer advisors who are here with us now. So Nazanin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Nazanin. I'm majoring in psychobiology. I transferred from Moore Park College and Pierce College. This fall, I'm going to be starting my second year at UCLA. It's very nice to meet you on pre-dance. If you have any question about that, let me know.
Thanks. Paola?
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Paola. I'm a rising second year transfer here at UCLA. I'm a microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics major. And I transferred from ELAC. I don't know if I already said that, but I'm also pre-med and it's really nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Paola. And Johan?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Johan. I transferred from College of the Canyons. I'm currently a human biology and society major and brain and behavioral health minor. I'm about to start my second year at UCLA, so fourth year in college. And I'm also a pre-med student. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to shoot them at me. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So this is our STEM team. So remember these faces. This is going to be your network to help you transfer to whatever your dream school is. So please utilize their expertise because they have already went through the transfer process and are at UCLA. If UCLA is your dream school, they're the perfect people to talk to. If it's not, it's okay. They can still help you with your transfer process and tell you about their experience with the process and resources that they have utilized at UCLA that may also be offered at other institutions as well. All right. So we're going to meet some time members here with us today. So you've already met Alfred and Blanca and me. So we're going to do Santi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Love to. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here with us again today. For those who are returning, thank you for coming back. Those who are new today, welcome, welcome. We appreciate the fact that you're here and how important it is to address the issues that are going to be addressed today. Aurelia and Blanca and Alfred's team have really put together a very thoughtful event today that addresses not only issues on STEM, of course, the content of STEM, but also issues around equity. And as you know, as we have learned from the pandemic, definitely access to things like the internet, to things like just all of the different things that impact learning and who has access to them are very tied to equity as well. So thank you for being here and taking an active role in participating in trying to change the way things are. We can't wait until you actually are approving pretty soon. So we're looking forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks, Auntie. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Castorena Jr. I am a program coordinator here at the Center for Community College Partnerships, and I oversee the partnerships between Los Angeles Trade Tech College and Los Angeles Mission College. I am a proud first-gen transfer student. I transferred from East Los Angeles College to UCLA. While at UCLA, I double majored in sociology and Chicano studies. After I graduated from UCLA, I applied to grad school and ended up at the other school with the other colors and the other mascots. I got my master's in social work. So welcome and enjoy your webinar.
Thanks, Frank. Beto?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I'm multitasking, so I have drop-in hours on my computer with peers, and I'm joining the webinar through my phone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alberto Moreno. Feel free to call me Beto for short. I am the program coordinator who oversees our partnership with Los Angeles Pierce College. So shout out to all the Brahmas in the room. Welcome, Brahmas, and welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing space. And like Santi mentioned, thank you for being interactive, engaging participants at today's webinar. Aurelia, Alfred, Blanca, and our peer advisors, the entire committee has put together an amazing event for you. And if you're back from session 1, just wait for what's in store today. And like most of our colleagues here, I'm also a proud product of CCCP. I participated both in Classic Site and Site Plus. And thanks to CCCP and their amazing work, I was able to transfer to UCLA. And I'm currently pursuing a master's in counseling at Loyola Marymount University. So if it really wasn't for CCCP, I wouldn't be where I am today. And it's really just great to be here in the space again. It's been a full circle. So thank you again to the committee, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thanks, Beto. Ariel?
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome to session 2. So for those of you who didn't hear the intro from session 1, my name's Ariel. I'm the program coordinator for CCP over at West Los Angeles College and LA Southwest College. So hi to any students that are from those schools. I also am a proud transfer. I transferred from Pasadena City College. I was a CCP mentee or advisee while I was there, but I transferred to UCLA. And I worked over at CCCP as a peer advisor, and then graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology. And now I'm working back over here. So really excited to be in this space. This is gonna be an awesome and fun and engaging session. Committee has put together a really wonderful program for you. Again, they did that again. And I really hope that y'all enjoy it. Thank you for coming, and just happy to be here with you all.
Thanks, Ariel. Are there any other full-time staff members here that I missed? I don't believe so. So really quickly, I'm gonna go through the rest of our team. So on the top kind of left-hand corner, the circle that I'm circling with the cursor, this is Jewel Bourne. She's the LA Valley coordinator. On the other side of Alfred is Perla. Oh, Chelly's here. Hi, Chelly. Would you like to introduce yourself? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Happy Monday. Happy STEM Day Part 2. Happy August. So good to be here with everyone. My name is Chelly Gonzalez, Program Coordinator here at CCP, overseeing the East LA College Partnership. So shout out to any ELAC Huskies in the house. I was also a transfer student from Santa Barbara City College. So shout out to anyone from the 805 or from outside the LA area joining us today. Just super excited to be here and looking forward to all the sessions.
Thanks, Shelly. Yeah, so like as the full-time staff members said, please make sure that you remember what partnership or community college that they are the coordinator of, because these are your contacts to help you with your transfer process. So going back, Jewel Bourne, she's the LA Valley coordinator. Perla Partida, she is the LA City College and Harbor College coordinator. Below Beto, this is Claudia Saucedo, she's the administrative assistant. On the other side of Ariel is Gabriela, she's the summer programs coordinator. And then we did Blanca, Frank is here, Santi, and Chelly. So that's our whole team. All right, let's move on. All right, we're gonna start with our land acknowledgement. So Nazanin.
Sorry, I was glitching. Land acknowledgement. The Center for Community College Partnership at UCLA acknowledged the Tongva people as traditional land caretakers of Tavangor and are grateful to have the opportunity to work for the Indigenous people in this place. As a land grant institution, we pay our respect to ancestors, elders, our relative relations, past, present, and emerging.
CCCP Black Lives Matter statement. To our students and colleagues in the Black community and across the diaspora, we stand with you. You are valued and an important member of our campus and off-campus family. We all need to acknowledge the challenges and work to change them. We must work together as people of color and allies, people who are concerned about our future, to eliminate these systematic disparities. We take a stand today and always because Black lives matter.
CCCP condemns hateful acts of violence, harassment, and rhetoric targeting Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Desi Americans. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been an alarming increase in the discrimination and violence perpetrated on the API-DA community. These acts of violence are nothing new. We are disturbed by these xenophobic, racially motivated attacks. CCCP stands in solidarity with all of our students, colleagues, and community partners who experience marginalization and threat. Stop AAPI hate.
All right, so we also want to acknowledge that the times that we're going through, so we know that the COVID pandemic has been very impactful for especially a lot of minoritized community, marginalized communities. So we know that all of the students that are here today, we have been somehow impacted with the pandemic. So we are just in all of your resilience and tenacity, and you're still pressing through with your education. So we do want to acknowledge that and also let you know of our fall plans to return in person. So as of right now, we hope to return to fall at UCLA with that 80% capacity. So 80% of our courses will be offered in person. These seats will require anyone on campus accessing any of the UC affiliated facilities and UC programs to be fully vaccinated prior to the fall term. UCLA is planning for on-campus housing for fall for expats and offer housing for first-year transfers and a higher percentage of second-year transfers. And then we also will continue with utilizing the mask mandate. So when we return in person, please make sure you're utilizing your masks to keep yourself and others safe. All right, so we have some community guidelines as well. So we do want to keep in mind that we are all a community here. We want to be respectful of others. So I'm just going to go through it really quickly. So we have etiquette. Please respect the cyber community. Please keep your microphones muted and click on speaker view. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to utilize the chat feature. We'll be monitoring the chat to make sure all your questions are being answered and any issues that may arise are being addressed. If you have questions, there will be a question and answering portion at the end of each workshop to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. Step in and step back, meaning giving other people the space to speak. One diva, one mic, meaning one person should be speaking at one time. Challenge the idea, not the messenger. And don't be afraid to ask. We're all here to help you and be a resource to you. So really quickly, I'm just gonna go a brief overview of our program. So we do use a critical race theory framework in regards to our program. So we realize dominant ideology, especially in education, is that of the majority white-centered ideology. And so we do want to give you guys the tools and the power to kind of challenge that ideology to make sure that you're comfortable in any spot of education that you're interested in pursuing and know that you belong there regardless of your background and all the things that you have gone through to get to where you are in education. So we talk about centrality of race and racism, challenging the dominant ideology, value of experiential knowledge, and interdisciplinary and intersectionality in education. and then also commitment to social justice. Then we also use the tenets of community cultural wealth, so linguistic, aspirational, familiar, navigational, social, resistance, and cultural capital. So for people of color, these are all capitals that we have. We see people in a position of power that we aspire to, that's aspirational. Your social is your family, or your family members are your familiar capital. Any experience that you have in regards to your family. Social capital, your friends and your networks, things like that. Navigating new spaces like education, like UCLA, for example. Resistance capital, keep pushing through to achieve your goals, especially in academics, regardless of the dominant ideology thinks about you, and your culture, your background, the place that you come from, the thing that defines you, that you're most proud of, that's a major part of your identity. And so we wanted to give you the tools and resources to feel empowered in your identity. So this is the agenda today. Again, it's also on the website that we put in the chat. So we're going to get started in a little bit because we're a little bit behind. So I do want to talk a brief bit about our program. So we do work to motivate and inform and prepare students on their transfer pursuits. As you already know, most of the team, full-time staff member and peer advisors are all transfer students. So we all went through the process at different times, and everything looks different, but we are here to give you our experience to help you with your transfer pursuits. And then this is our target demographic. So we really cater to students who are first in their family to go to college. So first in generation, low income students, non-traditional students, students who come from an underserved population, and also students who have recently graduated from high school and are planning to enroll in a community college or is currently enrolled in a community college pursuing a higher education. So this is our one-year requirement. So as a requirement for our program, you need to be in our program for 1 year. So that's from summer 2021. So now to spring 2022, you must attend one of the summer activities. So you all are already doing that by being here with us. And then you also are required to attend one CCCP sponsored activity each quarter. So we'll have a lot of variety of different activities that we're planning, some STEM related, some specific to certain community college or certain demographics. You will all learn and be hearing from us about these workshops and opportunities that we'll be planning for the fall and the rest of the academic year. Feel free to please make sure that you're also following on social media, because this is where we really post a lot of the information about the upcoming activities and events. You must maintain your enrollment at a California community college, apply to one scholarship, keep your contact information up to date, report your academic process using UCTAP, complete an entrance and exit survey for our program. And if you're admitted, please connect with us at CCCP. If you're admitted to UCLA, connect with us to kind of give back to the community, to keep helping it pay forward and bring in the next generation of transfer students to the UCs. So this is just a brief timeline of our program, just a quick snapshot. Sorry if I'm going a little bit fast, but I'll be here to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. So the Scholars application, it's really, really easy. All you have to do is visit our website. We also have the link to the application on our website. When you visit the application, you want to make sure that you're clicking P2TT-W for the Prior to the Transfer webinars, and make sure you're clicking June 14th to September 17th. And then for the third question, CCCP summer programs in which we have participated in. If this is your first time joining us for the summer, please make sure you're selecting none. If you are a returning student, please make sure you select the program that you participated in. You may be asked to provide a profile ID. Feel free to email us at cccp@college.ucla.edu, or you can call us at 310-267-4441, and we will look up your information to make sure that you are provided with the correct profile ID. And then you can also scan the QR code to access the application. Okay, so we also require you to have a UCTAP account. Okay, so this is what the UCTAP account looks like. Again, you can scan the QR code to make sure that you have the correct information. You just fill out, create an account, and put all your classes in, and that's it. So it's a really, really easy tool for you to utilize. We really require students to do this because it helps you with your transfer process and help you keep track of the progress that you're making in terms of being transfer ready. All right. And so this is just a little bit of our stats that we have for students. So when we look at the admissions rate for UCLA, it's about 26%, but for students who participate in our scholars program, because of the resources and the support that we provide to students, we do see that number jump to 50%. And then when we look at the UCs as a whole, 95% of the students who apply during a given year are admitted to at least one UC. Okay. So now we're gonna get started with our workshop. Dr. Roberts is here with us. We're gonna get started. So welcome, Dr. Roberts. Before we get started, again, we have the link to our website in the chat. Make sure you have the article, or you can scan the QR code to access the article. And then let me make sure you are co-host, Dr. Roberts. Give me a sec. Alrighty. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce Dr. Roberts really quickly. So Dr. Roberts, Joanne Roberts, her pronouns are she, her, hers. She is a Bermuda-born Jamaican who immigrated to the United States in her elementary school years. She is the last of 3 children from her parents who are both K-12 teachers. Her passions are people, teaching, and music. Dr. Roberts has a BA in biochemistry, a master's degree in biomedical science, and a PhD in molecular cellular biology and pathobiology. Over the course of her academic career, she has engaged in oral cellular microbiology, eye biology, and STEM education research. In her role with the Center for Education, Innovation, and Learning in CEILS, Dr. Roberts seeks to develop inclusive and diverse STEM faculty. With the team, she leads workshops on inclusive and equitable teaching and mentoring practices, as well as anti-racist education workshops for faculty, postdocs, and graduate students. She also implements programming to support and connect current faculty to regional colleges and universities that help to develop a sustainable model for supporting regional graduate students, postdoctoral scholars, and other working professionals interested in teaching and academic leadership. So thank you so much, Dr. Roberts, for being with us today, and feel free to take it away. And you should be able to share your screen.
Awesome, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are currently located. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you so much for that introduction and for that bio. I'm super excited to talk to you all today about how to engage in scientific literature and read scientific papers. And so the method that I'm going to share is called the CREATES method, and we'll go through that today in the process as we go through this presentation. And so I start with this sort of comic that shows a grad student or a student basically excited that they just finished reading this paper and it only took all day. And then somebody asks them, well, what was the paper about? And they're like, what? I was supposed to know, I was supposed to pay attention. And this is a common feeling, especially if you are just starting to engage in scientific literature, of how, looking at these papers can feel. So I'm going to have some opportunities for us to interact. Since there are a lot of you, we won't do breakout rooms or small groups, but we will do Mentimeter polling. So if you haven't used Mentimeter before, you can use your phone to scan the QR code or go to the website, menti.com, and then type in this code. And so the first activity that we're going to do is just kind of respond to this question. What do you think of scientific papers? So like what words come to mind when you think of scientific papers? So I'll take about 60 seconds for you to do that and show you those results. So again, you can use your phone to scan the QR code or go to menti.com and then type in the code. And while you're doing that, I will just switch screen here so that you can see. So here are the results of the words that are coming up. Research, long, abstract, informative, laboratory. And so the way these word clouds work, if you've never seen a word cloud before, is that the more often a word is used, the larger that word becomes. So in our group, the words research are coming up a lot, long, informative, abstract, fascinating, jargon. So this is awesome. There are a lot of really positive words here. I see pain and confusing is in there too. And confusing, again, ethics, structures, awesome. Thank you for sharing. So we're gonna move to the next question on this Mentimeter. And you should see the second question pop up, and you can tell me if you don't. And the question is, what do you find is the most challenging aspect of reading and understanding research papers? And if you don't see that pop up, you can let me know. It's on the same Mentimeter. You can use the chat to let me know if you don't see that. So we're getting some responses here. What do you find most challenging? Getting through scientific jargon is pretty high. Knowing enough about the subject. Understanding methods. Yeah, so all of these we're finding pretty challenging, definitely. So I think that with this creates method that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you some tools and strategies to be able to tackle some of these challenges that we're all having in common. All right. So this creates method, as I walk through sort of what each part means. The C is for concept map the introduction. R is for read and annotate methods and results. E is for elucidate hypotheses for each experiment and make connections to methods. A is for analyze and interpret the results. T is to think of the next E experiment. And then S is to synthesize and sort of bring all this information together. And so we're going to walk through each of these steps and give you an opportunity to practice a little bit as well. So before we get into sort of like the nitty-gritty of Craig's method, let's look at the structure of a paper. If you haven't been introduced to scientific literature before, the structure is that there's a title, there's an abstract, an introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And the paper generally might be set up like this, where you see the title here at the top with the author list underneath. The abstract will then be next, seen here in this green box, the introduction below. And then you'll also have the method section, which might come right after the introduction or could be at the end of the paper, the results section, and then the discussion section in a standard setup of a research article. So looking at the title, so titles will attract readers that are interested in that particular field of study. So there are lots of different journals and places that scientists can publish their work. And some of them are very niche or very specific in terms of the area that it's in. So the paper that I just showed was virology. So there's going to be specific scopes or focuses of these different journals. And so the titles will also reflect what sort of the narrower scope of this paper within that larger field. It's also a major determinant of whether a paper will be read. So if the title's not interesting, a lot of times it'll get skipped over. But it's also a way for you to understand as to whether or not this paper is something that is actually interesting to you, something that is required for you, or that will give you the type of information that you'll need. It's the only aspect of the article that appears in table of contents and databases used for literature searches. So when you are searching for a paper on a topic, it's going to pull generally words from the title. So you want to consider that when you're actually searching for papers as well. What should you take away from this title? Whether or not this information is related to your work. So is it potentially worth reading? And also, if the authors are making grand statements. So sometimes an author might write the title with a very concluding statement, and then it's part of your job and to read this paper and see, do you agree with this? So the nice part about science is that it's a very iterative process. It's a process that continues to build on itself over and over again. And so part of that process is to critically examine whether or not this is something you agree with, something that needs to be tested more, etc. Titles can take different styles, so it can be descriptive. So for example, the effect of heat on ice. It's pretty generalized as to looking at how heat affects ice, but it's not giving you any kind of detail. The other way is to state the title in a conclusion title. So it says exactly what was the conclusion or what was drawn from this paper. So for example, heat melts ice. So instead of just looking at the description of the effect, it's actually stating what the effect is. After the title, you have the abstract. So this is the sort of big picture of the paper, provides this brief summary. And it's going to be your second most important factor determining if someone actually reads the paper. So when I read papers, I look at the title and then I skim the abstract and I say, is this paper something that is actually going to be relevant for me or important for me to read? So it's written sort of as a mini version of the paper. So it contains all of those elements and those parts of the paper that I mentioned before, just in sort of bite-sized snapshots. So first, the very, very important or pertinent introductory info, the techniques that were used in the paper, the major results and conclusions are all in this abstract section. And so it's also important to consider when you're reading papers that papers have word limits. So abstracts have word limits, a number of words that the author can use, as well as the actual paper length can have word limits as well. And so when that happens, when you're reading through papers and it can feel complex, part of that also is contributed to, there's a lot of referencing back to another paper or another resource where you would find more information because there's only so much information that can be put into one paper. So it's also something to keep in mind. After the title and the abstract, you have the introduction, and this provides the reader with important information just in a lengthier form than the abstract, and really hones in on why was the study undertaken. So the rationale, why is this even important? What was the approach to this work? And then at the end, looking at sort of the conclusion, what was the problem at the end of the study? Or the state of the problem within the study, rather. So going back to the creates method, so we kind of introduced title, abstract, and introduction. And so the first part of the creates method is to concept map the introduction. And this is really about linking together these concepts and thoughts and ideas that are presented in the introduction of a paper. So really quickly on the Mentimeter again, you can use the QR code again, or you can keep the website up throughout this presentation. Have you made a concept map before? I'll give you some time to answer that. Take about 30 seconds. Okay, and I am seeing that we have pretty even distribution. We got 10 more seconds to answer. Yeah, so we have a pretty even distribution across the board as to our familiarity with concept mapping, which is perfectly fine. I wanted to get this gauge to see where we all are as we kind of go into more about what concept mapping is. So I'll briefly cover that first before we do an exercise. So in terms of what concept mapping is, it's basically a map of concepts, hence its name. So these nodes or these circles that you see on my screen, these would be where we would put the terms or concepts that we're thinking of. Between these nodes, then we would put linking lines, usually a unidirectional arrow or one-way facing arrow. And then on these linking lines, we'd put a linking phrase. And that would say exactly how does this circle connect with the next circle, or this concept connects with the next concept. An example here of a mini concept map would be the, if we're thinking about the introduction that we just talked about. So the introduction provides keywords. So the linking term here is provides. The next concept is keywords. These keywords are used to explain the rationale. So again, these nodes or these large concepts are being connected by these linking words. And then the introduction identifies the rationale. And this is how these three would connect. We can look at the process of doing a concept map. There's first the brainstorming phase, and that's the exercise we're going to do together. But you can see here on the right, this is an example of brainstorming a concept mapped about scientific articles. Scientific articles have like a title and introduction, results. And so the first thing was to write down sort of all of these key concepts and terms that you would want to organize in this map. So that's the brainstorming. And then actually organizing them, laying it out, doing the linking, and then revising. So concept maps don't have just one way that they should look. There's not a right or wrong per se of concept mapping. So yours might look different from your classmates. It might look different from mine, but we're connecting these concepts and terms in a way for us to understand and internalize them. So if we brainstorm from the introduction, so from the paper that was sent out, and we can put a link in the chat for the paper as well if you weren't able to pull it up from the QR code. Thank you so much, Priya. So the introduction or the first paragraph is also here on the screen. But in case you're having any issues viewing this, you also have that link. So go through this first paragraph for about 60 seconds and read through it. And then we'll take another 30 seconds to pull out key terms that you think would be important from this paragraph for a concept map. So I'll give you some time to do that. Okay, now that you've read through, take a few more seconds to pull out the key terms. And when you do, write in the chat what are some words, even if it's only one, just a word that you think is key in understanding this paragraph. Seeing some answers here: tooth loss, disease, periodontal disease, inflammatory disease, yep. systemic health, periodontal disease, pathogenic bacteria, dysbiosis. Awesome. Bone resorption. Awesome. This is excellent. Thank you. I see a couple more coming in. Disease in gums. Been treated. Absolutely. And so all of these are actually really, really important. And I'm going to simplify a little bit just for our exercise. But all of these words and terms that you're putting in the chat can be used in your concept map. And so I highlighted just a few for us to kind of get started, and a few that you've also mentioned. So periodontal disease, pathogenic bacteria. I highlighted Porphyromonas gingivalis because as the name of the bacteria that they're actually mentioning in the introduction. Usually if a paper is speaking generally about something and then they state a specific one after, it's usually because that's one that they're going to focus on. And then inflammation or inflammatory, which is what a lot of you have said as well. So if I pull out these keywords for myself, if I'm constructing a concept map, then I would first create these nodes and put these nodes on the screen here, and then connect them. I want to think about linking terms. So for periodontal disease, I might say it has increased P. gingivalis or Porphyromonas gingivalis, the bacteria. If I'm linking back pathogenic bacteria, I'm noting to myself that this Porphyromonas gingivalis is a pathogenic bacteria. This pathogenic bacteria contributes to periodontal disease, and this links these three. And so the linking terms don't have to be, super complicated or full sentences, but these are just ideas so that you know exactly how these terms and concepts connect. Then we have inflammation leads to bone resorption and tooth loss. And then periodontal disease leads to bone resorption and tooth loss. And so you can also repeat these terms as well. So there's not one set way to do this. And then finally, pathogenic bacteria increases inflammation. And so this is how I would start my concept map. And of course, as you go through the introduction and other paragraphs, through the introduction, you would have more terms that you can start to link as well. And some of these links may seem less important in this sphere as you're building your concept map out. And so that's the revision process that you would go through. So thank you all for participating in the chat. So what to take away from the introduction? The scope, as I mentioned, of the research that's being presented. So exactly what does it cover? Where does it fit? What are the topics being presented and what's the rationale? The goal and the main hypothesis are also in the introduction as well, which I'll show you shortly, of the entire paper. The key words and the players. So these are words that you can use for your concept map, or what are the main points that they're talking about. And I also recommend reading the introduction at least twice. And so you want to make sure that you're understanding what they're about to talk about in the paper. But also the first run through, a lot of times I saw the word jargon come up about what's challenging in reading the papers, is that the first time we sort of read through something, we're kind of picking apart what we know, what we don't know, but we haven't truly started to comprehend it. So at least twice, definitely when you're reading the introduction, so you have a really strong premise and understanding when going into the rest of the paper. So I put a couple quotes here from the final intro from the paper example, the final intro paragraph from the paper example. And so the statements that they make here, I just want to outline exactly what they are referring to. So they make a statement, therefore we wish to examine the potential for topical administration of vitamin D to the oral cavity. So here they're stating what their goal is, what they want to do in this paper, their overall sort of larger, broader goal. Another statement they make, which sometimes it is very clearly written like this in the introduction, and other times it's not, they don't use the word hypothesized, and so you would have to pinpoint it in the introduction as well. But they state their hypothesis clearly and say, therefore, we hypothesize that these cells can activate inactive vitamin D and allow for topical application of vitamin D to the oral cavity to induce an innate immune response. So this is their hypothesis that relates directly back to their larger goal when they're examining the potential for topical administration. And then the final part that you'll find in this final intro, a lot of times in papers, is that you'll find the scope or what they did. So they say, here we examine this novel mechanism. And we do this by demonstrating a mouse model and examine the feasibility. So they're stating in a paragraph form and summarizing what they did in this paper and how it fits within their, or relates back to their goal. I also want to sort of bring this up because I talked about concept mapping. We did a brainstorming activity and sort of outlined it. But this concept mapping is a tool. And I want you to have a way of thinking outside of this. So I'm not saying that you have to do concept mapping for every introduction of every scientific article that you read. That would be a very, very long process. But if you find that concept mapping is useful for you, then I would say that go ahead and do that. And until you have an exercise and a practice that as you're reading, you are thinking about how these words and these things connect. So this is really a framework and a starting point for all of you. There are alternatives to concept mapping as well. If you don't want to draw out a map and thinking about these terms, is to pull out those keywords and create a glossary for yourself. You can create sort of a jargon glossary for the paper. So as you go through the paper that you have an understanding of these terms and these words to refer back to as you're digesting the information. You can do bullet points in your own words. So summarizing key points from the introduction in lay language or in language that you understand, so that you know that you've actually comprehended what the introduction is saying. Or you can annotate or write in the margins of the introduction, sort of off on the side. This is something that I like to do sometimes sort of in combination with these. There's something that I find really important, something I want to come back to. I will kind of jot down or a definition that I just know I'm probably not going to remember. I jot that down in the margin of the introduction as well. So it's something that I can come back to. And so you can do any of these alternatives or do these in combination as well when sort of dissecting the introduction part. So now that we've gone through the introduction of the paper and concept mapping and understanding the intro, we're going to kind of loop or group in these REA portions of the CREATES method, which is reading and annotating the methods, thinking about the hypothesis for each experiment, which is different from the overall hypothesis that we just talked about, and then analyzing and interpreting results. So the methods part of the paper, as I mentioned before, sometimes it's after the introduction. Other times it's at the end of the paper. But it should serve two functions. First, it should enable readers to evaluate the work performed. Did they have proper controls? Did they use or have consistency, you could say, in the methods or the amount of something they use? And so it really gives a chance to evaluate, was this done well, and was it done within the parameters of what we know scientific rigor to be. The other function that it should serve is to permit readers to replicate the study if they desire to do so. So the idea is that you read through the paper and the methods. And so I should be able to go back to my lab and take the information that's in that methods and replicate the study or do the experiment myself. And so should is put in big, bold letters because there are times where you will come across a paper that doesn't fully meet this criteria. However, you know, as in science, we're always trying to make sure that we improve and become more rigorous in what we do for the method section. So you'll use the methods to work backwards basically looking at how were these results that are in the results section, how was this data actually obtained? So you'll annotate the figures, label controls, the experimental conditions, the type of experiment, how was it done, what was the method, what was the analysis method. Write your own title or summary of the figure, which allows you to sort of process the information and synthesize it, and then make connections between results and methods. So we're going to use our Mentimeter one more time here, and ask the question, how would you approach reading the methods section? What approach would you take? Would you A, read the methods before reading the results? B, read the methods at the same time as the results? C, read the methods after reading the results? And there's no right or wrong answer here. I know some of you maybe have read literature before, or maybe this is your first time sort of engaging. So even if you haven't done so, you can think about maybe how you might approach this. And I'm just going to see if we move to the next question. You can tell me if you're having any issues with the Mentimeter. If you see, here we go. So we have a lot of A's, a lot who are going to read the methods before reading the results. We have some who would read at the same time, and some that would read after. Awesome. And like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do this. The methods section, as I mentioned before, sometimes comes in the order of the paper before the results. And so in a natural progression of reading the paper, you would come across that first. So if you choose to read that first, that's absolutely fine. Some like to read the methods at the same time. I am one of those people that I prefer to read it at the same time. So I'll flip back and forth between the result that I'm about to read. So if I'm at figure 1 and I'm reading that figure, then I flip back to the methods and I look through and I see exactly what they did for that particular figure. And then others read the methods after reading the results. So getting a good understanding of exactly what results were obtained, and then looking back to sort of confirm and understand better exactly how those results were obtained. So we're going to look at what a figure looks like. Here, so from the paper. Looking at figure 4 as an example. So figures generally are numbered in the order that they appear in the paper, and they'll have a caption title that, in the same way as a title of a paper, can be either descriptive or it can be general. So in this, a descriptive or conclusive, sorry. So in this particular case, this figure title says effect of vitamin D on IL-1 alpha mRNA levels in vitro A and in vivo B. So this is a descriptive title. And then they outline, because they have 2 different panels in this figure, what is A and what is B. Underneath the figure title, then you have the actual caption outlined as to exactly what you're observing in A and B, and they'll normally include what was the sample, whether it's cells or some other types of sample, what was the treatment, so briefly sort of what the experimental procedure was. And then if there's any other pertinent information in terms of statistics, they'll also put that in the figure caption as well. And so here it's split up between the 2 panels, and then the statistics are put at the end. So if I'm going to read this figure legend, very similar to what we did with the introduction, going to read through it and then pull out sort of key terms if I'm looking at what were the methods used for this figure. So I've highlighted here some of the key terms that I pulled out. The first is the type of cell that was used in panel A, what was collected, and how did they analyze what they collected in terms of the methods. Part B, or panel B, now the sample has changed. Now they're not using cells, but they're using mice. They have their particular treatments again, and then what was collected and how was it analyzed. So when I pull that information out in terms of methods, then there are a few ways that I can sort of visualize these methods, and one way is to cartoon them. So in a computer generated format, it's easier to just sort of find pictures on Google, snap them. But usually you're not doing that while you're reading a paper. You might just sort of scribble or do some sort of drawing, or you can do just words as well in terms of creating a flow of exactly how these methods were done. So what I highlighted here, I'm now putting in sort of a cartoon photo format. So they had the cultured cells. Even if you don't know at this point what type of cells these are, they've identified what their sample is. So they had the cultured cells, and they had two different treatments that's talked about in panel A's description. They had the ethanol control, and then they had the vitamin D metabolite, or the active vitamin D. Then they isolated mRNA, is what they said, and then analyzed it using QRT-PCR and looking at IL-1 alpha. For part B, although they had similar analysis methods in isolating the mRNA and then doing the qPCR, they used samples now of mice. So they had sort of like a control untreated mice. Then they had the mice plus vitamin D, and then they had the mice plus the vitamin D metabolite, or an active vitamin D. And then they isolated the mRNA, but now specifically from the gums of the mice, and then did the same analysis. So this is cartooning the methods for this one figure, exactly how they obtained these results that we're observing in the figure. So you're going to have an opportunity to sort of give yourself a chance to walk through this. I'll give you 5 minutes to sort of work on your own on figure 2. So figure 2, I have it here in the on the screen, but there's also, if we can share the link for the Google Doc with the activity support. I also have it in a Google Doc if you need to access that instead. Or you can use the paper that you pulled up before. But use the figure legend of figure 2, pull out keywords like I just demonstrated, and then cartoon either by drawing or by keywords, the flow of exactly how you envision these methods were done to obtain these results. And I'll start this timer here now. So again, just take 5 minutes to work on figure 2 and pull this information out. And you can put questions in the chat that you might have as well, or if you'd like to come off mute, raise your hand. That's also an option. Does he have about 2 minutes left working on this? Take the time to also think about how these panels are different as well. And other strategies, if you've used other strategies to approach methods before, I'm happy to hear any of those if you want to put those in the chat as well, or if you're finding this helpful. Okay, so let's stop here, and I'm going to show you what I did for this methods for figure 2. Again, this is not a right or wrong, but just so you have an example to sort of look at what you've done for figure 2 and compare what kind of information that you've included. So here for figure 2, I put the cell culture for primary, because panel A used the primary gingival epithelial cells, and they had the ethanol control and then the active vitamin D. And then they did an infection with this bacteria, Porphyromonas gingivalis, and then analyzed it with fluorescent microscopy. So you might have chosen to include information such as the amount of the treatment. So for example, it was 10 nanomolar of the active vitamin D. That might be a detail that you've included in yours that I didn't include in mine, and that's absolutely fine. You might include timing in your methods example as well. So for example, in panel A, it said that the treatment was for 3 hours with the ethanol or the active vitamin D. And then they did the infection for 24 hours after that. So that's also information you could include. For panel B, it was different, or panel C rather, it was different, where they used the same cell type that I spoke about before, the OKF6 TERT1 cells and the ethanol control or active vitamin D. Again, they did the infection with the bacteria, but now their analysis is not fluorescent microscopy. Now their analysis is that they put the bacteria on an agar plate, essentially growing the bacteria so they can count how many bacteria were actually inside of the cells. And so that's how I chose to do my figure 2 methods. So we'll just pause here for a second. If there are any questions so far, we've covered concept mapping, sort of thinking about the introduction more in detail. We've talked about sort of the first parts of the paper, the title, the abstract of the methods, and then we talked about sort of cartooning and dissecting the methods. So are there any questions on those parts so far? And you can type a question at the chat if you have a question, or raise your hand. Awesome. I'm excited to know that I feel like I'm being very clear. So hopefully, again, if you do have questions in the meantime, you can put them in the chat. So even if I don't get to it at that moment, I will come back to it. So we're going to move to annotating the figure now, and talk about the results section. So the results section, really it depends on the article type. So in full-length research articles, you'll see only data, like only the data will be described in the results section. What was observed, talking specifically about in panel A, this is what was observed, etc. But anything that's interpreted, or what this data suggests or what they think about this data, is not put in that section. Instead, it's put in the discussion section. And the idea behind this is that the data should speak for itself. So when you as a reader are reading the article, you can look at the data and you can make your own interpretations of the data versus relying solely on what the authors of the manuscript wrote and thought about this data. Alternatively, in articles that are shorter in length and maybe might be a communication article or something, these results and discussions are often mixed together instead. Christopher, can you specify what you mean by would this, like would what apply? The results section? Or the entire creates method? Yeah, so absolutely. This creates method can apply to any type of scientific research article. So regardless if it's in engineering, if it's in biology, if it's in math, any type of published research article that has this sort of format, you can definitely use the creates method towards that. In addition, also, as I mentioned before, we really want to generate is sort of a way of thinking versus only specific approaches. So similar with the concept mapping, you might not use concept mapping, but you're using the thinking behind concept mapping to understand and connect ideas. So similarly, as we go through these other exercises with cartooning the methods, how do you pull out information from the article? These are the types of thinking that can apply no matter what specific area of STEM that you're in. So great question, Christopher, thank you. So again, sometimes these results and discussion might be mixed. And if they are, you want to make sure that you are also taking the time to critically examine the information that's being presented and not just taking it for face value. And that doesn't mean not to trust the authors, but it's more of the scientific process. So again, using this figure 4 from the paper as an example of how to annotate. So pulling information from not only the figure legend that's below the figure, but also from the actual article. So in the results section, they write this in paragraphs. You'll pull information from there as well. And so when annotating the figure, what you're basically writing is information to help you better understand what information this figure has obtained. So here we have the method that's used in panel A, which was the qPCR. That this panel A is in vitro, which they say in the figure legend as well. But noting here that it's in vitro, meaning that these are cells, and then they put ethanol as their label, but they don't say that this is the control. So that might be something you want to annotate here so that you know that this is the control, which means this is what you are comparing to. And what your experimental group is. In this case, it's the active vitamin D or the vitamin D metabolite. And I put the hours of treatment. And then sometimes what I like to do is that if there is something that I don't know what it is or what it does, I'll put that and annotate that on the panel as well. So here they're measuring IL-1 alpha mRNA levels. But if I don't know what IL-1 alpha is, then I'll write it in the annotation that it's an inflammatory cytokine. So for panel B, here in vivo, now they're looking at mice, so that makes it in vivo instead of in vitro with cells. And I annotate exactly how many days after with the experiment that they actually took out the gums and sacrificed the mice. Again, identifying the control and the experimental conditions here, which is the vitamin D, and then the active vitamin D as well. Yeah, great question, Gustavo. So Gustavo's question is, how can I identify the control and experimental groups? So sometimes in the paper, they will actually state which is the control. So for example, here in the, if I can go back, sorry. Here we go. Here in the figure legend under A, you'll see that they wrote 0.1% ethanol and then put in parentheses vehicle control for 24 hours. So in this paper, they did a good job of actually identifying for you what is the control. And then the experimental groups are going to be the groups that are being tested with something, right? So these groups, what's being tested is the addition of the vitamin D or the active vitamin D. And so this would be your experimental group. So sometimes it's very clearly identified in the paper. Other times, depending on the research area, if it's an area that you don't have expertise, it might require you to sort of read another paper or look into a reference article instead to understand exactly how they did the experiment, how that experiment is set up. But generally in the paper, it'll be clear as to what control or what is being compared to. So I'm gonna have you practice, you're welcome, using the skill that we just described about annotating and pulling information from the figure on figure 2 that we've been talking about. And I'm gonna actually put you in groups for this. Give me 1 second. So put you in groups with about 4 to 5 participants per room. And so you'll work on pulling out the information that you think is important or that you don't understand to annotate this figure. And so because this is an exercise, I don't want you to get hung up on knowing exactly what everything is, but pulling out the information that you think is important that you would include on your annotated figure. And then taking the time to exercise and put that actually on the figure for your own references when you go back to practice this. So the breakout rooms will go for about maybe 7 minutes. And when you go into your breakout room, the first thing I want you to do is to introduce yourself to others in the breakout room before you get started. And thank you, Supriya, put the activity support again in the chat for you so that you have figure 2 right there in your document. You can download it so you can annotate on it as well and have that for your records. So before I move you into the breakout rooms, are there any questions on what you'll be doing in the breakout rooms? So again, let's put this in the chat. Introduce yourself first. and then annotate figure 2. Okay, so I'll open these rooms for 7 minutes. And if you're having trouble joining your room, please let me know. You should see a breakout room pop up on your screen to join breakout room. And if you haven't joined a breakout room or are unable to, please take the time to work on this on your own. And I'm here if you have any questions. We have about 1 minute left in the breakout room. So if you are still pulling out information, that's okay. You don't have to finish now. Just sort of wrap up on the part that you are annotating, and then we'll go over how my example of doing that, and if you had anything different. Okay, I think we are coming back now. Welcome back as you're coming back into the main room. Awesome. So hopefully you got some good practice just now annotating figure 2. I hope you had the chance to sort of talk to others in your breakout room as well. And I'm happy to hear what might be different from your annotation than mine. So I'll show you my approach to figure 2 as an example. So annotating here, what type of cells were used in each panel. So in panel A, they used primary gingival epithelial cells. In panel C, they used these OKF6 TERT1 cells. So annotating and highlighting which cells were used where. They put control here, but they don't specify what the control is. So I annotated the control here as ethanol that was used. What methods they used for each. So here the method is immunofluorescence. Panel B was the image J of panel A, so it's essentially the analysis. And of course, your annotation will also depend on your familiarity with the type of information. So if I didn't know what image J was, I might write analysis instead, or like quantitative analysis, because basically panel B is sort of like a count or number percent of what is seen in A. I also put the method here for panel C as the agar plate and colony count. And then here at the bottom, I put referring to P. gingivalis infection, because in panel C, they write 24-hour pre-treatment and concurrent with treatment, but they don't write exactly what they're referring to. And so that's pretty common in looking at a science article, is that the figure can't include all of the information. It's just, it would become a very, very busy and convoluted figure to be able to understand if it did. So this information is actually in the figure legend, but I write it here in the annotation process for me to understand. Was there anything as you worked on figure 2 that maybe you had different in your annotations, or something that you included that maybe I didn't include? You can use the chat if there was, or you can also raise your hand if you'd like to speak as well. So anything that you might have had different from mine or included in addition to. Okay, great. So we'll go over just a couple more things in this method and this process. So we've talked about the introduction, we talked about dissecting the methods, and now we're thinking about understanding the results section. So this first part was annotating the figure. The next thing I want us to move into is understanding the hypothesis or elucidating the hypothesis for each experiment. So we identified earlier the overarching hypothesis for the paper from the introduction, but each figure also has a specific hypothesis that they were testing or that they are making a conclusion on. So when generating these specific hypotheses, a good format to think about is to use the prompts since, if, and then. So since is the rationale or the observation. If is the experimental question. And then is the expected results. So you're saying since XYZ occurred, or since they saw this, if they do this, then they will see this. And so I'll give an example for the figure here that we are that we've been going over, figure 2. And so the hypothesis that I wrote here, it's not one that's included in the paper, but this is to understand what their thinking is behind this. I wrote, since vitamin D is believed to have antimicrobial effects, and that's something that we would read in the introduction, that they put in the introduction. If the cells are treated with active vitamin D, then they would expect to see a decrease in the number of intracellular P. gingivalis or bacteria. And so in this case, I'm thinking again, since whatever the observation is, whatever is known. So if they do this particular experiment or method, so if they treat, then they expect this thing to occur. In addition to elucidating the hypothesis for each figure, another method or approach to understanding the results is to rewrite the title in your own words, which I mentioned before. And I highly recommend this because it allows you to take a moment and really summarize the information that you are understanding and reading from the article, from the figure, and then putting this in words that says, I understand this. It's the same concept as if you know it, then you can teach it. In this regard, if you know it, then you can create a new title for it. So for figure 4 as an example, their title was a descriptive title, effect of vitamin D on IL-1 alpha mRNA levels in vitro and in vivo, which we looked at before. So if I were rewriting this title, one way I could rewrite the title is that rewrite it as a conclusion title. So summarizing what this figure is actually about and actually saying. So vitamin D significantly reduces IL-1 alpha mRNA levels both in vitro and in vivo. Or I can do another title, could be IL-1 alpha mRNA levels are reduced in vitro and in vivo in the presence of both vitamin D and vitamin D metabolite. So these are two different ways to write this or rewrite this title. Neither of them are wrong. Neither of them are right. They are just a way to summarize my understanding and my learning. So your sentence might not look exactly like mine, but it's your way of summarizing the information in this particular figure. So try this for figure 2, the same figure that we've been working on, and rewrite the figure in your own words. It won't take 5 minutes, just maybe take about 2 minutes to do this, and then we'll share anonymously using the Mentimeter poll and take a look at what titles that you've come up with. And this will be our last activity that we're doing. All right, take about 20 more seconds. And as you're doing that, I will put the Menti up so you can start to submit your titles. So I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen so I can move to some of the titles. Please keep submitting them. And I will share some of the ones that are popping up, which look really awesome. And again, if you're still submitting, you can go to menti.com and use this code. See a lot of great ones. Vitamin D, influence on antibacterial activity. So great. That would be a descriptive title. Awesome. Antibacterial activity after vitamin D treatment. Great. Effect of vitamin D on poor promoted gingivalis causing periodontal disease. Awesome. Vitamin D can be used to treat antibacterial activity. So yes, no vitamin D versus vitamin D. Yeah, vitamin D reduces bacterial activity, less bacteria quantified with vitamin D. Vitamin D treatment for bone loss. These are great. Those are great descriptive titles. Relationship between resistance. Awesome. I'll say about 10 more seconds here. These are really, really great. And yeah, so please take the time to try doing this with other figures that you come across. You can use the paper that I shared with you all as an example, or use a paper that maybe you've come up or been assigned in class, or a paper that just interests you, but take the time to practice this as well. So sort of finishing up here on the results, what to take away from the results? Well, everything. The results are the bulk of the paper. It's the nuts and bolts. It's what brings the paper together. It's the whole point of the paper is the results section. So you really want to make sure that you are have a really good grasp and understanding of the results and what's being presented. But most importantly, decide on what conclusions you draw from the data provided. So as I mentioned before, the articles will present to you what the author's interpretation is and what the authors think, which is absolutely valuable and absolutely important. But ultimately, you want to take the time to examine critically with their methods and their results and how they obtained their results and what results they obtained Do you agree? What conclusions do you draw and what do you see from the data provided? And these steps will help you do that. So once you've sort of annotated and worked through these different steps that I've talked about, you'll have basically overall interpretations and conclusions of whether or not the hypotheses were supported and how convincing the results are. So looking at figure 2, the hypothesis was supported. That PG was significantly reduced in active vitamin D treated cells, which they show with their data. They had limitations though, right? So when you're interpreting the results and you're analyzing it, what's missing? Their limitations is that these were all done in cells. They were done in vitro and nothing was done in vivo. So like they used mice in another experiment, but not in this one. Another thing to note is that they had the pre-treatment in panel C and then concurrent treatment, so at the same time, and this showed different results. And so what that suggests is that timing might matter in these experiments. And what does that really mean overall when thinking about this long-term or in other experiments? So these are the kinds of things you want to pull out as you're analyzing and interpreting results. The discussion will come right after the results section in a longer paper or together in a shorter paper, as you mentioned. This is summarizing the conclusions. It's relating it to other results. It's looking if there's any abnormalities, anything that is unexpected, anything that doesn't have a full explanation yet, is looking for those things as well. Any implications. So what's the bigger picture? Like, how can we use the information that we understood now in this paper, and how do we use it for treatments and therapies? How do we use it for building this particular tool? How do we use it for whatever the big picture is in that particular article or paper? And then the grand summary is sort of just summarizing all the results and conclusions that are reported in the paper, occurs in the discussion as well. And so there's more, but there's not more. So this is sort of concluding, but thinking about what else could be in a paper. Sometimes they have supplementary data or extended data that's included in the paper as an extra section, and it can contain results that support the main point of the paper, but can have extra controls, different methods, as opposed to what's shown in the main figure. So that's also something to pay attention to, and what could be really important as well. So as we're wrapping up, just one final Menti. We started with this question about what do you think of scientific papers? So if you could take the time and after sort of going through this process of the CREATES method about thinking about them and how to approach them, what do you think of scientific papers now? So take about 60 seconds. And I'll switch my screen to the Menti. Sorry. Awesome, informative. That's a part that's coming up. Pain is still there, but that's okay. Detailed, specific, analysis, complex, understandable, comprehensive, a little bit of agony mixed with pain, okay, but tedious, specific, a doable puzzle, awesome, helpful, even more complex, it is complex, beneficial, breakdown, great. And I see that the words that are coming up the most are informative, detailed, pain, and tedious, which seem to kind of go together. But understandable is also coming up. So that is amazing. Scientific articles are, yeah, I see TDs in the chat too, can be long. They absolutely can be. And I'm hoping that these tools will help you as you continue to dissect them and go through them, and allow that pain and that agony and that tedious to just be a little bit more palatable, a little bit easier, a little bit more understandable and digestible, and that you get a lot out of the papers that you engage in and the experience you have reading scientific articles. So I will end there and just ask if you have any questions for me about the science articles, about anything we've covered, or any other questions that you might have. On Composition 101, is that a course that you taken, Gustavo? Awesome. Yeah, I suppose that would have been helpful in that course. Fernanda, I cannot answer that question. Maybe Aurelia can answer that question.
Hi. Yeah, so Fernanda, that's our goal, to have more webinars like this during the academic year. We were just trying it out to see what the response is, and it seems like you guys are really receptive to this. We do want it to be more interesting and doable for people to understand scientific research and then also pursue scientific research. So that's something that we're really focusing on going into the academic year. So yeah, any other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Roberts. We really appreciate your time and support with us doing this, and also having this very, very informative workshop for us. We really appreciate all the work that you have put into today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, you're very welcome.
All right, so now we're gonna go into our lunch break. So you are more than welcome to stay on the line, or you can leave and come back at 1 p.m. Go get a bite to eat, relax, take a nap. I know that first workshop was a lot. Maybe you're a little mentally like, okay, I need a break. So this is your time to take a break. We'll be back at 1 for our hidden curriculum in STEM. So we have Dr. Michael Rodriguez from the School of Medicine coming to talk about the hidden curriculum in STEM, what students, especially first generation college students, don't really know about education, and specifically STEM. And he's going to give you tools and resources on how to kind of help you navigate those new environments and be successful in your STEM pursuits and your STEM career, okay? All right, yes, Dr. Roberts has put her email in the chat, so feel free to email her if you have any additional questions. We hope to have her again sometime during the academic year. We'll be planning stuff, so hopefully I'll be reaching out to you again, Dr. Roberts. But yeah, so thank you everyone, and we'll see you guys at 1 after lunch. All right, thank you, bye.
Bye.